The Drums of War, Chapter 37. A city, and a city. On the roads to St. Augustine, Florida, terror. The antique reproduction Indian motorcycle roared beneath Senator Malik Saber as he expertly navigated the picturesque reproduction of the Bayfront district. Unlike most antique motorcycles, Senator Saber's was an exceedingly rare example produced before the colonization of Mars, which survived the intervening decades intact. To him, the fact that it had survived so much and continued to serve was emblematic of terror and all she produced. Just so, he had always appreciated the effort various cities across Terra made to revive their beautiful places, despite what must have been a tremendous difficulty. As a history buff, he was more aware of most that much of the scenery that looked thousands of years old only dated back to shortly after the declaration of sovereignty. Still, it was no small pleasure as he turned to ride his motorcycle over the Pluto Compact Memorial Bridge to see the pleasure craft bobbing in their slips or tooting across the sparkling water in a marina through its transparent surface. It was a decidedly peaceful scene. Less pleasurable was the crowd gathered around the entrance to his destination, the Hall of the Fallen. Rather, it was two crowds, where there should have been maybe a dozen or so people entering or leaving the memorial's columns entrance by the way of broad, shallow stairs rising from the road to the classical hall jutting out over the waves in somberest pose. There were people shouting at one another. The dueling discordant chants rising from the opposing groups rather spoiled the mood of the memorial. It was tense, almost on the verge of violence, whether from one side, which had adopted variants of no Terran blood for Xeno soil, or the others calling for total extermination of Exarch, in disunified chants to that effect. Both sides waved placards and had flags whose handles looked suspiciously like they were intended for clubs, and more than one taunt bubbled over the chants. In fact, if it wasn't for the two lines of hard-eyed, hard-boiled police officers separating the groups with quiet authority, they might have come to blows already. Thankfully, the police had kept a narrow corridor up the steps clear. Senator Saber didn't fear for his safety, even as the pro-extermination faction spat threats and insults at him as he walked by. He knew the look of the kind of fury that only comes from someone who's never seen combat when he saw it. Once he'd passed by the stone columns, the protesters became muted, as if there was a solid wall between him and them, though he knew there was no such thing. He had never thought of it before, but the place must have some way to dampen outside sound built in. He breathed a sigh of relief and shrugged a little tension out of his shoulders beneath his riding jacket with a crack of well-worn leather and let the somber reflective mood of the place wash over him. Hidden lights cast a golden glow across the whole of the cavernous stone hall and made the walkways between the standing slabs of marble look somewhat imposing with their understated implications. He took another deep breath and plunged him directly in the middle. The slabs stretched up a good 5 feet above his head and were inscribed from top to bottom, and across their entire 6 feet in length with the names of those who fell in service of the Republic. And where one slab ended, a gap of only 4 feet separated it from where the next began. It was a weighty place. He found his quarry midway down the hall, where the slabs ahead were blank, waiting in mute vigil for the names to be added to those behind. In fact, one such name was being added as Senator Ethan Robert watched with shoulders thumped and eyes glazed. A pair of sharply dressed workers maneuvered a box containing inscrutable carving devices to properly align the new names, and used heavy-duty suction cups to fix it in place before activating. The device hummed quietly as it did its work, and Senator Saber's friend watched. It went quiet, and the workers broke the seals, set the device on the floor, dusted off the newly carved name, and began the process again directly below the new name. "We were supposed to meet for drinks 2 hours ago, Ethan," Senator Saber said in a near whisper. Senator Robert tore his eyes away from the somber and understated work of the obvious difficulty and sighed. "Sorry, I didn't think it was a good idea for me to drink." "Coffee?" Senator Robert blinked as if seeing Senator Saber for the first time. "Oh, Malik, sorry, everybody's been trying different things to cheer me up since. Are you upset about the glassing an enemy world, or their retaliation?" "We don't actually know, Malik. We don't know how deep their reserves are. What if our counter-invasion barely scratched the surface of their territory?" Does that change what needs to be done? Maybe. The workers dusted off another new name. You were right, by the way, Senator Sabre was treated to a deeply amused sight of his friend turning and raising a sardonic eyebrow as he explained. Total war was inevitable with the Dominion of Exarch. I was mistaken to think that we could snap them hard enough to sue for terms, and they will need to be defeated utterly before they'll be willing to deal with us in any way other than on the battlefield. Senator Roberts snorted. That's if we can defeat them. Historically, the Republic has faced worse threats. Such as? The machine hummed, filling the silence between the two friends. Beyond what worse, they represented an existential threat. A wave of all-consuming giant insects unable or unwilling to communicate in any way. The grubs, of course, but you'll say they were nipped in the bud, and you'll be right. I practiced in the evacuation of 3 planets during the grub extermination, you know. And what came next? Sure. We stopped the threat cold before it got very far into either of the Republic or CIP. But it cost billions of lives. Don't forget, I was R&I during the invasion and the extermination. 6 Terran worlds glassed, and I don't even like to think about how many Xeno worlds we turned into a glass gulf. Had to be done, though. You saw what happened if even one of those things' egg sacs survived. Senator Roberts shuddered and said, Yeah, we end up making the Lost Boys. Going back further, the worst war since Corporate War. Didn't you learn about the Alliance War? I don't remember much. Just that it was why the CIPers never do more than shake their fists at us. The workers aligned the carving device once more. In terms of moral depravity, I'd say that the Tanhei Z Dun was close to the Dominion. Worse, since they were Terrans abusing fellow Terrans. Slavery, mass starvation, brainwashing, mass killings, rampant sexual abuse. The works, all of that. And they thought that every Terran should be under their rule. We knew their measure, though. We knew what they could do and how to beat them. So we did. And so we will. How many more names here will it cost? How many will be forgotten forever if we refuse the bill? Senator Roberts' eyes hardened. His spine stiffened, and his eyes cleared. I shouldn't be here whining about how bad it feels to tell these men what it is required. Not when they volunteer without complaining. Not when they go and do the real work. The workers started up the machine with a quiet hum once more. It seemed to Senator Sabre that they had more resolve in their shoulders than when he'd first seen them. He and his friend watched them work for a while longer. They didn't need to say anything more. Aboard the speaking softly, Yovdril sat on the sofa of the Drilvly family quarters, with Maeve curled up in his lap, squeezing him about his middle with the 4 of her arms, as if he might disappear if she let go. And Levain huddled up against herself in the corner made by the opposite armrest. He sighed and gently ran a hand over his younger sister's head, and softly said, It's not like I'm disembarking today. But you're talking about leaving our ships for the Republics. Grandpa served in the Republic. They even have statues of him. That's not the same, and you know it. Grandpa did saw work in a tug. What you're talking about, it's crazy. You said that you were going to join the naval infantry and fight people. Yodril grunted as Maeve squeezed him harder, and he asked her, What do you think Uncle Brix is doing? Lie? Fighting, but that's different. How? Levay slivered and hugged her knees tighter and explained, Because among the star types we raged is one of our ships. So was the Mr. Smee, and she had Uncle Roger on her. The younger girl flinched, as if her brother had slapped her, and she mumbled, But he was a Terran on a Terran ship. He was our family. Tears shone in Levay's eyes as she mumbled, I know. May his soul sail home and his murdered ship's name find a new hull. So why are you mad at me for wanting to do my part? Why can't you just join the Justicar or a Dreadnought? The fleet is split. All of the Star Sailors are at war already, and you won't have to. Levay shook her head as if to dispel tears before continuing. Have to fight the bad guys on a planet with no ship to protect you. And their fleets are always split. You'll be on a ship with no fathers, no mothers, no sons, no daughters. Only brothers and sisters because everyone else got sent away. Just like when we split the fleets. Yovdril sat silent for a good minute or two before explaining. It's because of the honor god. They fought for us, and that we sing in a bad guy's own ships. And if it wasn't for them, we would have never got away. The bad guys still killed her, but we got away. You, May, Mom, and me. And one day we'll commission Among the Star Tides we sing again, and we'll make the true again. But first, I owe a debt to the RNI. While the brother was speaking, LeVay scooched closer, and by the time he was done explaining himself, she was leaned up against him, and she whispered mournfully, "Honor for honor. Don't worry, I can't join until next year. I'm not going anywhere until then." Yovdril could feel Mavy's tears soaking through his shirt. He pretended not to notice. Far from the Drilvie family quarters, Travy found herself embroiled in her duty as an ambassador of the fleets. The Republic of Terra, together with the CIP and Romanova, had halted the Exarch advance, yet not without great cost. The capital world of Kingdom of Jacuvia was in flames, and the Star Council had themselves lost a staggering 15 planets. That wasn't even to mention the strikes to Terran territory suffered. Unfortunately, the Dominion of Exarch had recently fielded ships able to actually engage Terran cruisers and win. This made securing the flank more than a little important. To that end, Ambassador Sophia Laurent had arranged to visit the Draconian Empire. The meeting hadn't gone very far. The introduction of Third Princess Lexar and her statement of governmental official position of local fortification. Travy was looking at a cleverly disguised screen at the view of the capital city of the Draconian Empire as she waited for the trouble to begin. It didn't take long. LeVay was explaining, "Well, Pasifia cannot provide you with weapons. We have extensive experience in logistics and can produce the materials you require." "Silence, barbarian!" Third Princess Laxay snapped, and turned her narrow snout away from all three present Terran ambassadors. Travy turned and regarded the four-legged, two-armed, jewel-encrusted reptilian princess and said, "You ought to not insult your host on their own ship, princess." "I have not offered insult. The barbarian was making useless noise, sailor." "Keep calling us barbarians, and we'll send you back to your palace without a shuttle," Ambassador Lorenz said primly, as she delicately sipped at some hot coffee. Once again, Travy was deeply jealous of the Terran's ability to metabolize so much caffeine, and for it to be stimulant rather than a relaxant, because that's what we consider barbaric behavior. "I've stated the policy of the Empress. I see no need for further discussion." "Unfortunately, you're at the rear flank of the Star Council," Ambassador Volkov explained. "There is a chance the Aspects could surge through the glass gulf to attack you from Rimwood, and thus cut the Star Council off from the rest of the Alliance." Third Princess Laxay tilted her head and examined the star map of the area in question before saying, "We are less prepared for an attack from that direction, but wouldn't such an attacking force risk development?" "It depends," Travy said. "As formidable as the Republicans are, they cannot be everywhere at once, and if the enemy concentrates sufficient forces to such a flanking maneuver, they may be forced to pull forces from the front line in the Kingdom of Jacuvia, the Star Council, and the various Terran frontier areas. This would increase the cost of our victory," Ambassador Lorenz said softly, like the whisper of a dagger across a whetstone. "An increase in costs in terms of lost Republican servicemen and innocent civilians, and the Republic of Terra will have an accounting of all such costs. The fleets could not sail stars which are held by those unwilling to hold them against the would-be conqueror, nor would we suffer to have a supposed ally contribute nothing, while we kill and die to keep the war from them," Travy said somberly. Third Princess Laxay seemed to calculate for a moment before saying, "What further action do you recommend?" "First of all, we need to free up more of our forces for the offensive. You don't win wars by defense, after all." From there, it was a discussion of how, when, and where forces would be committed. Upon the surface of the Forge world Exnuva. Weeks. It had been weeks since the allegedly habitable hellhole had been liberated by the Republican army, and Pip and his people were still there. Pip had served as the liaison between his own military and the RNI, but apparently the Republican Navy is very different from its army, even its infantry element. They'd come rolling out with beachheads established by the RNI like a single inexorable wave until every last military installation, warrior, officer, and aristocrat had been destroyed, made casualties, or captured. It was a terrifying display. Tanks, infantry and power armor, jets and helicopters overhead worked in perfect concert, or what seemed like it at the time. Pip had seen enough mangled suits of power armor and burned out husks to know that the victory came at a cost. And Terrans were the types to think that one life was a steep cost. They were also the type to not count the cost until it was already paid, and for that he was grateful. Still, progress off of this ancestralist rock was painfully slow. The army had managed to gather up the Latreille from across the planet into a single refugee camp, and were working on making sure that everyone was accounted for. Pip tried to remember that he didn't want anyone left behind either, but he hated this place. At least they got proper fish to eat and didn't have to rely on crayons. Plus, the Terrans were trying to make their accommodations at least not miserable even when they fell short of comfortable. So it was in his spirit that he approached the soldier in power armor, probably a human man from the lack of tail and its general shipping size. "Any word on the transport, Corporal?" "How the fuck did you learn RBC?" "Fucking learned it when I served with you. You got an answer or just a thumb up your ass?" "Fuck me sideways, I fucking wish. Word round E4 countries maybe next week if we can figure out where the missing 30 of your people went." "We're down to just 30 missing." "No shit. Found like 200 of you dudes, kids too, in some flooded tunnels yesterday. Apparently they scrammed when the planet started shaking and the slavers stopped paying attention." There was a lump in Pip's throat as he said, "Fucking A." "Fucking A," the corporal agreed. "I could probably round up some volunteers for search parties to search those flooded tunnels." The corporal shook his helmeted head and explained, "But unless we can get Latreille pattern power armor out here and print it up quick enough. Them tunnels were sewers. Your people got new wing added to the field hospital. They're in worse than rough shape." "Ancestors," Pip swore. The corporal grunted his agreement and looked at the display of a datapad in his hand before saying, "These fuckers, they recorded your people as numbers. Fucking numbers and nothing else. They didn't even have the fucking decency to add a note. Adult male, juvenile female, infant male. We have to figure out how their fucking numbers work." The plastic of the datapad started to flex as he continued to speak. "And they don't even fucking bother to record when they murdered one of you. They just fucking changed your number, and that's fucking it." The datapad began to creak. "What's got me right now is I figured out how to recognize the code for kids. At last 30. All kids." "Ancestors," Pip swore again. The datapad snapped in the soldier's hands as he said, "Yeah, God or your ancestors or fucking Satan, damn these fucks. Damn them forever." Pip got the feeling that the corporal was done talking, so he offered an agreeable grunt by way of agreement and scampered off to find someone else to ask about the other thing that he was interested in knowing. In the lee of a shattered building where the rubble formed a hollow, he found a perfect opportunity. A poker game. Present were 3 privates first class, a corporal and a specialist, and most importantly, their helmets were off. The privates were all human men, each a different skin and hair color. Humans had so much variety. The 2 E4s present were a doggo and a big kitty, and their expressive ears made for terrible poker faces in Pip's experience. But that didn't seem to be helping the privates. Odd. "What's the buy-in?" Pip asked as he reached into his jumpsuit pocket for the only thing it could be. "Pack of cigs. But you dudes..." "Oh," the specialist began as the package thudded on the table. "I like poker. I'm Pip." "Mark," the corporal grunted. "Ira," the specialist added. "Bryan," one of the privates said, and was quickly followed by his fellows. "Steve, Orion." "Texas Hold'em." Pip nodded and pulled out a piece of rubble as the Terrans counted out some pebbles and served as chips for him, and Orion shuffled the cards. "I don't see why they don't just put a bullet through anything with bones poking out its fucking knuckles," Steve said, evidently reassuming the conversation. "Pluto Compact," Ira replied simply, and tossed a couple of pebbles into the pot for the ante. Steve anteed up and mused, "I don't recall the Axeback Dauphin signing the Pluto Compact." "So we should become like them?" Orion asked. "Want to build a couple of altars of 2 corn or some shit?" "Corn is fucking dumb. Raw, I like kidding. I'm the god of kidding. Gimme skulls," Bryan said teasingly. "Shut the fuck up. You run orcs," Steve scoffed. "I just don't figure why we bother saving slaving, kid-killing scum. They're bound to get to strike 2 best." "Even the kids born as aristocrats who haven't hurt anybody?" Pip asked quietly as he called. Orion showed the first 3 cards, and Pip found himself with 2 pair, 10s and 2s. The private looked at the cards and agreed quietly. "Adult exarch come from somewhere. The instate ones, the fighting ones, and the ones giving orders." "That doesn't excuse the depraved shit those fucks do," Bryan muttered darkly. So your solution is just to shoot the lot? Pup asked. Not mine. I don't know what it should be done, but that's a job for the politicians. I'm just a grunt with a gun, Bryan answered as he raised. You know about the slave instructors? Every Terran around the pot narrowed their eyes, and Ira said, Mixed fucking bag there. Some of them were downright cruel to your folks. Some weren't workmanlike, Orion said as he called. Now's protected us. That was met with wide-eyed silence. Of course, he did it within his limits, and it was mostly advice on how to avoid punishment. But he stuck his neck out for us anyway. Thus, he helped the advanced drop scout with some info. Do you know his number? Surf Instructor 1232-03412. Lanky guy, nervous eyes, yeah. We called him 12s. Fuck, Iris said. What? One of the other POWs stabbed him yesterday. He was seen cooperating. He's laid up in the field hospital, she explained. Any chance that you can get me in for a visit? We'll see what we can make happen, Mark grunted. Pup let the subject pass and focused on taking his new comrade's cigarettes away. End of chapter. I'd quickly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.